So, my story starts in the fall of 2016. It was a warm autumn evening. It was a September Friday night, and I was out. I had some beverages with some friends, and I was wandering around the Oregon district seeing what adventure I could get into. And that was when I saw him. Piercing blue eyes, a baby face, an own tattoo, a backpack, and a sign that said, "Every penny helps." And so I sat next to him on the stoop and I asked him what he needed, and he told me that he was hungry. And so I took him to buy some food from a street vendor, and I asked if I could sit with him for a while, and he obliged. And I asked him a whole bunch of questions, like how did he get here, and where did he sleep, and why didn't he just get a job? And his answer surprised me. He told me that he actually wanted a job, that he regularly applied for jobs, but that they wanted a phone number, and he didn't have a phone. And that thought had never occurred to me. So I left that evening with my mind full of this young man, and I swore that if I saw him again, I would buy him a phone. And as fate would have it, about a week and a half later, as I was heading on to 35 from Kiwi, on the other side of the barrier was a young man with piercing blue eyes, a baby face, an own tattoo, a backpack, and a cardboard sign that said, "Every penny helps." And so I got off the highway at the next exit, and I found a phone store where I purchased a phone, a SIM card, and minutes for $80. And I went back onto the on-ramp, I pulled over, I turned on my flashers, I jumped over the barricade, ran over, handed him the phone, gave him a hug, and left. And I didn't see him again. About a year later, I had volunteered to serve at an event called The Longest Table. And if you aren't familiar, they closed down the 3rd Street Bridge, also known as the Peace Bridge, and they extend a table, 600 chairs across the bridge, and they feed the community. More than 50 zip codes are represented. So I showed up for volunteer orientation, where my job was to be a table host. So the table was divided into sections of 6 people, and as a table host, my job was to keep the conversation going. And they would strategically place people at each table from different parts of the city to encourage conversation. So after volunteer orientation, I headed towards the bridge to find my table section, 43. And that was when I saw him. Piercing blue eyes, a baby face, an own tattoo, a backpack, and a flower behind his ear, standing directly underneath the peace sign on the bridge. And I went over to him and I said, "I don't know if you remember me, but about a year ago, and he interrupted me and said, "You stopped on the on-ramp and handed me a phone." And I said, "How are you? What are you doing?" And he told me that he had a job at McDonald's and that he had a place. And I hugged him and I cried and I invited him to join The Longest Table. And he told me that he felt called to stand under the peace sign for a while. After the kickoff ceremony, the 600 people headed towards their chairs, and it turned out that they had more people show up than they had accounted for, so every seat was accounted for, and they were pulling out more chairs, except for table section 43, where one chair was empty. So when David came to say goodbye, my table invited him to join us. And when we went around the table and everyone introduced themselves and where they were from and why they were there, David said he was there because God wanted him to be. And the 83-year-old woman from Trotwood who was sitting next to me said, "Amen." And over the course of the next 3 hours, we talked, we listened, and we explored solutions for our city. I do not know what the impact was on the individuals at table section 43 of this young man with piercing blue eyes, a baby face, an own tattoo, a backpack, and a flower behind his ear. But I am sure that it was more impactful than an empty chair would have been. On May 9th, I'm hosting an event here about hunger. So please share it. Tell people, because an empty chair is not impactful. We all have a chance to have an impact on our community. Thank you.